But in truth, all she had to do was continue to practice what he had taught her daily, make it into muscle memory, and she would be fine. There was then only one element for her to learn air. But that was the issue. There were no air nomads left to teach her. What could she do? John made mention of the things that the Lotus had set up for this. They began to devote time and effort to discovering a way to help the Avatar in such a scenario, and even though no airbenders existed any longer, that did not mean that their ways had completely died out. Zhang informed Katara that the White Lotus had discovered a man that could help her. He resided at the Eastern Air Temple, and despite being a non-bender, most benders could ever hope to learn. But the path to the Eastern Air Temple would be long and hard, as it resided on a mountaintop. Sokka and Hakoda would assure Katara that it would be okay, as it was their job to help her get to places so she could fulfill her destiny. And so they set out for the Eastern Air Temple. The journey was hard. It was long, and it was very roundabout. Hakoda had been keeping tabs on the war and the many sorties and campaigns that were occurring across the world, and given the importance of Katara and her mission, they couldn't risk the Fire Nation discovering her. So they had to move up closer to the eastern side of Ba Sing Se and come down to the mountains from the upper peninsula to avoid conflict, which extended their travel time immensely. But finally they crossed over the sea and made it to the island with which the mountains of the Eastern Air Temple were located. They began to climb the mountains. Upon reaching the top, they were astounded by the architecture of the temple and wondered how it was that the air nomads could build something like this atop such a huge mountain. But what surprised Sokka most of all was the concept that someone could live up here. They ventured into the old temple, where they came across an elderly man with a white beard. He introduced himself as Pathik, a guru who had studied the ancient arts and spirituality. He knew from the start that Katara was the Avatar due to a vision he had of this very moment, and said that he knew that she'd be coming very soon to meet him when he sensed the cosmic energy coming from the Southern Water Tribe. Katara would sit with him and ask if he could teach her the art of airbending. Pathik lamented that he could not serve as the best teacher to do that for her, but said that he knew how to get her to train with a real airbender, and all she needed to do was master the Avatar state. Katara questioned how she could do that, and Pathik smiled and told her that the Avatar state was what he could help her with, and would be able to show her a realm of power she had never known. He would lead her to a peaceful waterfall, and there have her sit down and be calm. The guru sat there with her and told her that it was best that they started from the ground up. He went with her on a spiritual journey into her own mind, and there they began working to cleanse the chakras from the bottom up. He told her that it was blocked by fear, and told her that she had much fear in her as the result of her status as the Avatar. He understood that such responsibilities came with pressure to be perfect, and that it was only natural to be afraid. But he told her that the best way to deal with this fear is to realize that whatever will be, will be. That she shouldn't focus on what others tell her it means to be a good Avatar, and instead do her best. Even if she fails, she fulfilled her duty as Avatar by at least trying. But he said that her fear hinged on so many other things as well, some of which were blocking other chakras. So they continued up. Next was the water chakra, blocked by guilt. He said that her chakra was being blocked specifically by her guilt at not being able to protect her mother. Her guilt that it was somehow her fault because she was born as the Avatar. He once again told her that whatever happens is what is meant to happen, and that it follows a plan set out for them. There should be no guilt over the death of her mother, as her mother was one who had helped Katara get to where she was now. Without her mother's death, Katara might have never been able to complete her training as the Avatar as quickly as she had. Her death had given Katara strength, and it was a gift to her from a loving mother. It was not something she should blame herself for, but instead something she should be grateful for. This recommendation would follow up into the next chakras, which were being blocked by shame and grief. He told her that it was okay to feel the way she was feeling about her mother's death. As he told her this, Katara began to break down into tears, which could only show Pathik the true pain in her heart. The loss was still fresh to Katara, but she needed to push past it. You feel ashamed because you did not attempt to fight back when your mother was being killed. You were afraid, Katara, and that's okay. You're human like the rest of us, and fear is a natural part of life. The one thing living beings hate doing most is dying, because when they die, they feel like they're not living beings anymore, and people don't want to let go of that. But you must look at this from your mother's perspective. She fought to protect you.
Guys, welcome to the Vlad Catcher Show, the #1 show for founders, execs, and entrepreneurs who are
Died because she loved you. Even if you were scared, you were a child. You still are, and you've come so far despite your fear. So ask yourself this. Would your mother forgive you? Katara nodded. She would. Pathik smiled. Then what you should do next is forgive yourself. From there, he began to tackle her grief by reminding her that even though her mother was dead, it didn't. So, as long as Katara remembered that her mother's spirit was alive somewhere, even if distant, the bond that connected them in life would always keep them close. He told her that she wasn't in a party of 3 on this journey, but a party of 4, as the spirit of her mother was and would remain with her the entire time. This would bring a smile to Katara's face. He continued to help her cleanse her chakras until they reached the final one in the crown of her head. This one, when properly cleansed, would then finish cleansing the rest of them and allow her access to the Avatar state. Pathik told her that her fear of losing her brother and father, her fear of failure, and all her earthly responsibilities were just that, earthly. The spirit was greater than just the earth, and beyond this world laid one far better, far greater, and far happier. While it was hard for the Avatar to completely detach from worldly affairs, as their entire being was based around defending the world, it was important to know what to intervene with. The Avatar itself was a spirit that protected the world. Rava, having bonded with a human, he said that she needed to remember that her job was important, and that she could very well lose her father and brother and even die herself. But if she did, it was okay. After all, whatever God's will was for man, that was what would happen. And not even the Avatar could change that. The Avatar was an agent of change, not change itself. And change would come, with or without the Avatar, and balance tended to like to restore itself in its own way. He told her to let go of everything that weighed her down. If she could do this, she would attain the Avatar state. Suddenly, she was in the Avatar state. And once there, she met her airbending teacher, a shy little boy with an arrow on his head. She seemed a little shy as well. He recognized this and told her that it was okay. I wasn't much in life. I never completed my training of the other elements, nor did I fulfill any destiny. And sometimes I feel bad about it. But that doesn't mean I wasn't the Avatar, and I can still help in my own way. I was the youngest airbending master in my temple, and could rival even the stronger monks. If you would allow me, I'd like to teach you. Katara would nod. I would be honored to learn from you. As Katara was training in the Avatar state, Pathik decided to leave her for a time to check up on the others. There he saw Sokka and Hakoda. You're the Avatar's family, right? I wouldn't suppose you're benders. They would shake their head. Sadly not, Sokka said, but I don't suppose you can teach us to become benders. Pathik shook his head. The ability to become a bender is something one must be born with. But this doesn't mean you can't benefit from learning from me. After all, I too am a non-bender. Sokka sat forward. What could you teach us? Pathik smiled. Have you ever heard of the concept of chi blocking? The group trained for quite some time, with Katara studying airbending in the spirit world with Aang, and Sokka and Hakoda learning the basics of chi blocking from Pathik. Pathik showed Sokka and Hakoda all the best places to strike and how to strike them. It was a discipline that could take a long time to master, but they were at least capable of doing it to a passable degree by the time Katara woke up from her Avatar state. It felt as if she were finally a fully realized Avatar. They thanked Pathik and told them that they needed to be off to fulfill their destiny. Pathik offered them a little advice by telling them that there was a certain group of rebels in the capital city of the Fire Nation that had acquired plans for secret tunnels in and out of the castle. The rebel group had long since been destroyed, but if they went to their hideout, they might still find the maps. They once again thanked him for the help and began to descend the mountain. Once down, they knew that they would need to find a way to the capital city of the Fire Nation, so they would find and take the armor from 3 Fire Nation soldiers and would use them as disguises. They would then find ship manifests and would locate the first ship they saw that had orders to return to the Fire Nation. They boarded it. It was nerve-wracking being surrounded by those who wanted them dead. But the good news was that they did not know what Katara looked like, nor would they know Sokka from your average Joe. Hakoda might be a different story, but he recognized that he simply didn't have to take off his helmet. But he made his children promise to put the mission above him. He told them that no matter what happens to him, they can't do anything. Even if he's discovered and killed, they can't try to save him. That was a hard promise to make, but thankfully they never had to deal with it, as Hakoda's presence was never questioned. He blended in with the rest of the faceless soldiers who refused to remove their mask. As the ship pulled into the harbor, Katara, Sokka, and Hakoda all got off. They sought out and found the old rebel hideout, and found the tunnels into the castle. Still wearing the uniforms, the group snuck through the tunnels and made their way inside. As they made it into the throne room, they witnessed the Fire Lord. Ozai questioned them and asked what they were doing, intruding upon his solitude. Katara would remove her mask and helmet, and declare that she was there to restore balance. Ozai would grow angry with this and stand. He would walk through the flames and onto the floor. The Avatars come to put an end to my plans, Let's see how much that title's worth. Ozai would fire a blast of flame at them, to which Katara, Sokka, and Hakoda would jump out of the way. It was just then that Azula and Zuko walked into the room to inquire something of their father. Seeing them fight, they decided to aid their father, rushing in to take on the stragglers. Zuko would try to take Sokka, and Azula would take Hakoda. As the battle went on, Sokka and Hakoda would recall their chi blocking training and attempt to do so. With his club in one hand and his index and middle fingers open in the left, attempted to dodge Zuko's fire and draw close. Hakoda did the same with Azula, but as he struck out at her, she realized what this was, as she had seen it before. Chi blocking like Tai Li, eh? Perhaps I should show you why chi blocking is a forgotten art form. Azula would attempt to create distance so that she could attack, but Hakoda couldn't. Katara would be facing off against Ozai, striking out at him with flames, like he would do. It was obvious that he had the greater experience with this form of bending, so Katara would utilize water bending, pulling water from her pouch and swirling it around in front of her before turning it to icy spikes and firing them. Ozai would release a blast of fire from his mouth that melted the ice and evaporated the water. Katara barely dodged by dropping down. She would use airbending to sweep Ozai's feet, causing him to fall to the ground. Once he was down, he'd be trapped by earthbending. All the while, Sokka managed to get close and tap a few of Zuko's pressure points, blocking the flow of his chakra. Hakoda would throw his club at Azula from a distance. It barely grazed the side of her face, causing her to lose focus and turn her back to Hakoda. Hakoda used this as a chance to draw closer and block her chi, but it was all a ploy to get him to lower his guard. Azula smiled and turned back before killing Hakoda with a full-power fire blast to his chest. "Dad!" Katara and Sokka screamed in unison. At the same time, Ozai had broken free from the earth by melting it with his flames. He stood and looked at the body of Hakoda. "So let this be the fate of all who stand against the Fire Nation." Katara, eyes full of tears, turned to face Ozai, her eyes glowing pure white. "No, let this be the fate of all those who stand against me." A vortex of other elements began to swirl around her as she drew closer to Ozai. Sokka had turned his attention to Azula. She chuckled at him. "Are you going to attempt to block my chi as well?" "No, I'm gonna kill you." Sokka came closer and attempted to strike her with his club, but she crossed her arms and protected herself. He would then take from a pouch on the side of his leg a group of throwing knives. He would then throw them at Azula, striking her pressure points, causing her body to go numb. She looked up and couldn't move. Sokka stood over her, club raised high. "This is for my father." He swung the club down. All the while, Katara blew Ozai back. She would rise into the air and begin to increase the potency of her vortex, slowly pulling the entire room in with it. She looked to Sokka. "Get outside." He saw her and didn't hesitate. Running outside, he would wait. It sounded as if the whole building was coming down. He looked in and saw only dust. He silently prayed that she would be okay. There was a shadow coming through the dust toward him. He would raise his club, ready to strike. But it was Katara. She smiled weakly. "I did it." She would pass out then and there. Sokka would catch her. He heard the sound of guards barking orders from down the hall. He put her on his shoulders and began to make it out of the tunnels, where the two would steal a boat and escape under cover of night. With the Fire Lord and his heirs dead, there was nobody left to run the kingdom. The war ground to a halt. Other nations, seeing this decisive blowback, began to push back the Fire Nation into their own country. A coalition of Earth Kingdom warriors and Water Tribe warriors would take the capital city and force the Fire Nation to surrender. All the while, Katara and Sokka returned to the Northern Water Tribe to live with their grandmother and their new step-grandfather, Pakku. As the war came to an end, Katara embraced a different aspect of her avatarhood and turned into a peacekeeper. She would visit from nation to nation, helping them rebuild, and would even restore the monks to their air temples. None of them could airbend, but it was Pathic's belief that soon the elements would balance out, and those who followed the airbender's way of life would develop the ability to bend the element again. As the story of Katara came to a close, she became known as one of the most accomplished avatars in history, going down in the history books as the one who ended the 100-Year War. And that's where I plan to call it. I hope you enjoyed this video. I really enjoyed following this train of thought. My favorite part was when Katara trained under Pathic to awaken her chakras. I liked delving into the mental side of things and who Katara was as a character in that moment. I also felt that it was the perfect time to give Sokka and Hakoda a gimmick. I hope you didn't mind. But what was your favorite part? Let us know in the comments below. Be sure to like, subscribe, and ring the bell to be notified when we drop more videos like this. And if you can't wait for those, I highly recommend that you try these videos. Until next time, peace.
The global economy is driven by shipping. Without shipping, all of that shuts down. All of the conveniences that we have in our lives are much harder to get.
Something that you truly wouldn't understand until you set foot in the shipyard and really got a feel for the sheer scale and size of what we're doing here.
We have a very proud history right here in Philadelphia, but we've struggled in recent years. We need to reindustrialize that capability, and we need to work with partners globally to do that.
하나오션에서는 세계 최초, 세계 최대 이런 이제 선박을 많이 건조를 하고 있습니다.
We see the opportunity to be able to contribute, help revitalize the U.S. maritime industrial base.
Worked here 25 years, and I'm part of the legacy of the Philadelphia shipyard.
At our peak here in Philly Shipyard during World War II, we had approximately 40,000 workers here.
This place symbolizes pride and tradition. It's also a major source for employment here.
Come on, guys. Usual. Make sure you guys are following all paper cards.
I think I might be carrying on my family's legacy. My grandfather was in the Navy.
And this is the actual coin they gave us when it was launched, the christening date, which I was there and my son was there. Very few people who work here have that coin.
There's a number of factors going on with the U.S. shipbuilding industry. Number one, you see elements of a cyclical demand. Secondly, you've seen underinvestment, kind of at an industry level, over the decades. A combination of those factors have kind of weighed down on the U.S. shipbuilding.
Let's start. The basics is to bring back that growth, that strength here.
First comes
Navy
movement.
and U.S.
Try
shipbuilding.
moving over towards me.
하나오션은 지금 1970년대에 시작을 해서 연간 30초 40초의 역시 약속된 일정의 사이가 보면 여기가 500m 넘고 여기 거의 130m 거대한 이 결정체가 아닌가 이렇게
You're just getting away.
The shipyard almost a year ago, as Hanwha usually does. We move in big ways.
Is wall running.
Here
Try
in
running
Philly,
up
we
that cliff.
produce 1 to 1.5 ships.
If you run straight toward it, you'll be able to run up the side of it.
So it just gives you a sense of the different scales of complexity. 하나오션은 30년대부터
Looks like you know how to control your chakra properly.
할수 있는
Now
다양한
I'll tell you about chakra jumps. You can use those to jump even farther
매우
distances.
정교하게 공정을 관리를 하고 있고
Philly Shipyard has being the leading shipyard in the world with the latest technology. The two of those bring the strength to the shipbuilding.
저희 하나오션은
Cross a wide valley. Just use a wire kunai.
을 빠른 시일 내에 전국을 하고 있습니다.
Introducing the business card that
You
gives
can
back
use
all you
recovery
put in.
if it seems
You
like
chase
you're
that
gonna
backwards
fall
for
off a
business.
cliff. So don't forget.
If you're just seeing a trim out version,
All right.
what's
Next, I'm going to teach you how to attack. All right. Try attacking your opponent now.
Avatar
The
The Last
key with
Airbender
walking
is
is to always
legendary.
keep an
I
eye on
am
your
not
opponent.
kidding you. Even after so many years, it has not only remained fresh in the minds of those who watched it 17 years ago, but it's bringing in new viewers
Throwing
from
kuna
Dragon
is
Class.
a good way to hit
They
far
even
away
have
enemies.
action figures like Uncle Iroh and Prince Zuko.
Now,
Honor not
you'll need to
included.
protect your
It was
body
bringing
when
them
your
this
enemy
on and off shoot,
attacks.
which some
Do
would
this
say was
by
subpar
guarding.
compared to the greatness of Avatar, but personally I really enjoyed it. After all, the roads that he grew was the most interesting villains I've ever had the pleasure to see. It also brought us various comics as well as novels, including two very good ones about Avatar Kyoshi. Those books are really fantastic. Those of us who've been here long enough know that our channel, the Amagi, actually originated as an Avatar-based YouTube channel. Like good old days. We have long since moved on to many other great series, such as Naruto. Sometimes it's nice to get back to the old stomping grounds, though, almost staying true to who we have become since then. And as such, I think it would be a cool idea to do another What If. Today's What If will be if Avatar Aang was a Shinobi of the Hidden League. That sounds fun, right? And if y'all like it, maybe I'll follow up on it, even visit Naruto as an airbender or something. Sounds good? Let's get into it. But first, welcome to the Amagi. Before we begin, we publish a new video every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. The Amagi's resources beyond just this channel, so if you're a fan of us, please consider subscribing to our other channels and following us on all of our social media. Help us reach our goal of passing 100,000 followers on all of our accounts by the end of the year. Before we truly start with our What If, I think it's best to set a few grounds just to make sure everything goes correctly. The best thing about Naruto and Avatar is that his characters are generally considered to be nothing more than athlete levels of strength. Unless you're Rock Lee, you probably aren't going to be doing too much damage physically. Well, Naruto's last week did show us Naruto casually taking a shot with Bule, but at least in the start of both, they seem very human in strength levels, which makes this easier as it equalizes their faces. The problem we run into immediately out of the gate is that they both use very different energies to manipulate elements. Naruto uses an energy type merely known as chakra, while Avatar, much like Dragon Ball and so many other series, is not really. However, it's not impossible. These two, as the basic usage of both, are similar enough they could match if we tried hard enough. Naruto possesses 5 basic chakra natures, with other natures being created by mixing these together, the yin and yang release being separate from these, being the manifestation of spiritual and physical things. These 5 natures are fire, water, wind, earth, and lightning ones. Now, Avatar also possesses chakras. Nothing was the one to explain to Aang about the chakra. There are 7 of them throughout the body, and those of Naruto through the 8 gates technique includes another, and each one serves as a gate that allows energy to flow. They are, and forgive me if I mispronounce any of these, Muladhara, which is the chakra that represents earth. Then there is Svadhisthana, that represents water. Manipura, which represents fire. Anahata, which represents air. Vishuddha for energy itself. Anja for, I don't remember if Avatar ever explained what this one did. Insight, maybe? Then Sahasrara, which is enlightenment, which was used to explain how Aang enters the Avatar state. Altogether, these elements and their respective chakras, whether it actually be an energy or merely wells of energy, all function similarly. So for the time being, I would like you to suspend your disbelief and just assume that both Avatar and Naruto's techniques and styles are compatible with each other. With all of this out of the way, I think we're set to begin our What If in earnest. Oh wait, one last thing. We are going to take Aang right out of the time where he left the Southern Air Temple and place him in the Naruto world. This means he never iceberged, which also means he has no prior experience with the Avatar state, doesn't know that the airbenders have been destroyed, and won't have his natural lifespan shortened. Well, we say shortened, but in actuality he was 110 years old when the series started, meaning he will easily live into the Boruto era. That is, if he actually survives in this dog-eat-dog world that we call the 5 Great Shinobi Nations. So now, let's get into it. Aang, with his flying bison Appa, were flying away from the Southern Air Temple and flew straight into a storm. They fall into the ocean and seemingly go under. What happened next, Aang isn't quite sure of. He doesn't know how, but he wakes up being pulled out of a river by a group of men wearing green flak jackets and possessing strange headbands with odd symbols on them. But where am I? He asks weakly, having just been revived. Where's Appa? The shinobi bring him back to the village where they admit him to a hospital. He's discharged a day later and left in the strange village with the faces of great men carved into the surrounding mountains. Welcome to Konoha, they bid the boy. They're a friendly village, but they're also very cautious. They've never seen a beast like Appa and assume him to be some new experiment. Even further, the kids ask why a boy like Aang would have a tattoo on his head. Aang tells them he's an air nomad from the Southern Air Temple, and the people begin to believe he might be crazy as they've never heard of an air nomad from the Air Temple. At one point or another, I would assume that Aang would draw enough attention to bring him into the interrogation unit under Ibiki Marino, who would be trying to piece everything together alongside Aang. Ibiki would ask Aang if his terms, Fire Nation and Earth Kingdom, could be other names for the Land of Fire and the Land of Earth, but Aang seems completely unfamiliar with the map.
They hear the vocal tone of the room, they know it's Mac, and I can't show them that really found it, don't try to doubt it, we make it happen.
Their names for the Land of Fire and the Land of Earth, but Aang seems completely unfamiliar with the map. He claims that the Fire Nation is in the west, with the Earth Kingdom making up most of the continent to the east, with the water trap dividing the northern and southern poles. Yet this map shows that most of these nations are together. Aang mentions the Earth King and the Fire Lord, the Great Walled City of Ba Sing Se, as well as the incredible mail delivery system of Omashu. But Ibiki has no clue what these things are. Aang is beginning to think he's going crazy and starts to panic a bit. Ibiki begins to worry if he is perhaps certifiable. However, they tell Aang to calm down and just try to adjust. They get him a place to stay for the time being, and Aang just sort of thinks about where he is and what he's going to do next. Last thing he heard, the Fire Nation was at war with the world, and now he was in a world where the last Great War ended. As it stands, he has nowhere to go and no way to get back. But then again, wasn't that his wish? He was the Avatar and bore the weight of the world on his shoulders. Now he's free to be normal. Well, as normal as he desires. He wishes that Gyatso could be there with him. He misses Gyatso and wishes that he at least said goodbye. But with this, Aang decides he would like to try life in this world. A world where nobody knows what an avatar is. He would enroll in the academy to learn what this chakra thing is, and find it a completely different thing than what he's used to, with completely different usage. However, he finds the basic principles to be similar. He's also astounded that everyone in this world has the basic capability to use more than one element. Some of these so-called Jonin have mastered all of the elements. One of these alone could probably fulfill the mandate of the Avatar. Aang isn't as gifted in these jutsu as the others are. When it comes down to the final exam, he isn't able to make a shadow clone. However, he does try to impress the teachers by spinning 2 marbles in his hand with his airbending. When that doesn't work, he displays the air scooter, a technique that he created that earned him the title of Airbending Master. It's how he got his arrow. This is enough to get him on a team, as his strange usage of wind nature could be useful in battle, but even further proves that he has large wells of chakra if he's capable of doing such a feat. They decide to assign him to Team 7 under Kakashi Hatake, and to be the peers of Sasuke and Sakura Haruno. He would meet with Kakashi, and he'd begin by asking them their names, likes, dislikes, and aspirations. Sakura and Sasuke would remain as what you would expect. Kakashi would move on to Aang, and Aang would simply identify himself as Aang without a clan name or anything, which Kakashi thinks is suspect. But he begins to lovingly nickname him just Aang, as his student had said. Aang talks about things he likes, including his flying bison named Appa, and gliding through the air. Things he dislikes would be killing and eating anything that used to be a sentient creature. As for his goals for the future, he just wants to live freely and be happy. Sasuke would ask Aang why he would want to be a shinobi if he hated killing, and Aang would say that he's just doing what everyone else is doing, and that he can be a ninja without killing people. Kakashi says it might be hard, but to try for it if that's his nindo. They would do the bell test like normal, and ironically, Aang would get the bells as soon as everything starts, since his usage of the element of air is unconventional enough for Kakashi not to expect. Kakashi would sigh as his plan backfires, but he knows he can salvage this. He tells Aang that it remains true that only 2 of them can pass. There are 2 bells, but 3 students. Who does he choose? Aang realizes that both Sasuke and Sakura want to be shinobi far more than Aang himself, and would choose them both and offer to go back to the academy. Kakashi is pleased with his answer and makes all 3 of them his genin. They would do some odd jobs as usual, and then they would get the mission to the Land of Waves. Much like Naruto, Aang would freak out when he's attacked by the Demon Brothers, but unlike Naruto, he still possesses the capability to move and gets out of the way. Pushing his fists forward, he would knock them back with a blast of air, knocking them out against the trees. He would tie them to the trees with their own chained claws and dust off his hands. He would look at the others who were rather surprised that Aang could deal with these guys himself. Aang looks back. What? They would move on and encounter Zabuza. Most of this happens the same, however Aang is incapable of transforming into the Demon Wind Shuriken, so Sasuke would need to. He asks Aang if he can throw it correctly, and Aang says he'll just use his airbending to do so. Aang would spin the massive shuriken with his air in a similar way that he would the marbles from earlier, but on a larger scale. He would toss them at Zabuza, who would dodge both, thinking that this was the ploy, not yet realizing that Sasuke had transformed. By the time he recognizes it, he's too late and needs to defend himself, which allows Kakashi to escape the water prison. With Kakashi's help, they push Zabuza back, only for him to be knocked out by Haku, who strikes him in a way that simulates death. Kakashi, however, is drained. He tells the others to attempt to run up the tree and learn to hang there. Doing so would give them better chakra control. Sakura gets it almost immediately, but Sasuke has a harder time adding too much chakra. Aang has zero luck, as he has never used his bending like this. He has great control of his energies, but he isn't sure how to do what Kakashi is telling him to do. It's not like he has a hard time running up a tree. He could use the air scooter if he wanted and end up at the top faster than you could say Flamey-O Hot Man. But the issue is just standing there like Kakashi was doing. Aang can fly, he can run up the side of things, but he can't just stand upside down or on water like Kakashi can. Aang assumes that if he manages to study it out, he might be able to learn water bending, which would allow him to simulate the water thing, even if he is using ice, but as it stands, he just can't do what Kakashi's asking him. Despite this, Aang would not quit training. He might begin to focus on other things. Try his hand at learning water bending. I doubt he'd be able to get all too far without a true teacher, but he might get the basics down. At least enough to push and pull, but that's about it.
Guys, welcome to the Vladcatcher Show, the #1 show for founders, execs, and entrepreneurs who escape.
Far without a true teacher, but he might get the basics down. At least enough to push and pull, but that's about it. They would continue with the mission once Kakashi had recovered enough to move. Inari and his mother would likely be kidnapped since Aang is not too tired from training like Naruto would be. They would all be watching the building of the bridge happen when Haku and Zabuza would show up. Like the original, Zabuza would target Kakashi, and Sasuke would be targeted by Haku. But the difference is that Aang is here as well. They would be surrounded by Haku's mirrors. Aang would be utterly confused, and Sasuke would tell Aang to keep his eyes open. Aang is looking around for Haku, whose image appears in the mirrors. He's trying to figure out how this Oz magic is working. That's when these Senbons start coming. Aang is struck with this and is surprised with how much it hurts. He's told by Sasuke that Haku is inside the mirrors. Sasuke would try to melt them with his fireball technique, and Aang would try to with his airbending, but there was no getting through them. They just kept coming and in greater volumes as well. Aang is about to be struck when Sasuke would jump in the way of it. Sasuke would take the Senbon and fall over, seemingly dead. Aang would come to his side. Sasuke, please don't be dead. He would not be able to tell if he was alive or not and fears for the worst. In a moment of pure rage, Aang would tap into the true power inside of him. His eyes would glow, as would his arrow. His voice becomes many, talking. You will pay for that. The stone bridge around him begins to break up, and the water from nearby would pull itself upward to surround him as a ring of fire would encircle his orb of air that encapsulates him. Sakura would be awestruck, and Kakashi and even Zabuza's fight would stop for a moment as they look back. He's using 4 of the 5 nature releases at the same time. In that great of a volume? Kakashi was amazed, but went back to fighting Zabuza. Aang, in the middle of his avatar state, would rush forward, smashing the mirrors and knocking Haku out of them. Haku was overwhelmed, his mask shattering. And the sight of a kid about his age, especially one with such a kind face, causes Aang to calm, especially when he hears Sakura call out to him. Aang would fall out of the avatar state and pass out, leaving him open to Haku, but Haku doesn't attack him. Instead, he rushes over to protect Zabuza from a fatal Chidori that Kakashi was thrusting forward. Most of this basically goes the same, with the exception of Inari and his mother being hostages. But given that Zabuza has no connection to them, it wouldn't stop him. He's one of the 7 ninja swordsmen of the Mist, meaning he is well within his power to free Inari and his mother from Gato's grasp. Before killing Gato, everything basically ends the same. The bridge is built, and they name it the Great Aang Bridge. They would return to the Hidden Leaf, where they would do a few more odd jobs. Kakashi's trying to figure out more of what Aang really is. You see, he wouldn't have been surprised by Naruto, given that Naruto is a known Jinchuriki, which means that he has all the power of a tailed beast inside of him. But how would he consider Aang's power? Is Aang a Jinchuriki? In control of some strange Kekai Genkai? What's his secret? Where did that power really come from? Having no leads to go on and Aang not being completely sure of what this is himself, Aang would merely say it's because he is the Avatar. Kakashi would ask what he meant by that. What is he the avatar of? Aang says that even he is not sure, but apparently he's the reincarnation of some legendary bender who could master all 4 elements, had a connection to the spirits, and was meant to bring balance to the world. Kakashi would internally hypothesize that this boy in his charge may somehow be the reincarnation of the Sage of 6 Paths. He would be totally off the mark with that, though, since Aang is really the reincarnation of ancient Ultra Instinct Shaggy. Also, it's hilarious to think that Wan's greatest feat as the first Avatar was getting a kite stuck in a tree. Kakashi would then think that it's best to offer up his team to the Chunin exams. Maybe Aang can't use conventional jutsu, but his potential made him a force to be reckoned with. Also, along with the concept that he might just be the Sage of Six Paths reincarnation. Not. Aang and the rest of Team 7 would go to sign up for the Chunin exams, but would be stopped by Rock Lee, who wishes for a match against Aang. This is because he's another student who does not possess the ability to use common jutsu. Rock Lee would see a lot in common between him and Aang. Aang would accept and they two would begin to spar. Rock Lee would come at him like a freight train, and Aang would use his own like-the-wind fighting style to just start dodging his attacks and work his way into blind spots and the like, eventually ending up behind Lee and remaining there, no matter which way Lee turned. Eventually, Lee would get around and manage to strike him. He would attempt to use the front lotus on him, but would be caught by Might Guy, who would scold and strike Lee for this. They would then hug and cry and happily run the track, all while Sakura and Sasuke consider Lee and Guy weird. Aang, on the other hand, actually finds it endearing, as it somehow reminds him of the type of relationship he had with Gyatso. They would sign up for the Chunin exams and wait for them to start. The first part of the exam is a written test. Aang really isn't the smartest, and so he's doing everything in his power to cheat. He gets a sneaky idea. He rears his head back and taking a deep and dramatic breath like there was a tickle in his nose. He would then feign a sneeze so powerful that it knocks everyone's papers off the table. He would then grab the one that had the most answered questions and pretend that it was his. He could erase the name Sakura Haruno and replace it with Aang. However, he is rather screwed when the final question that could leave him a Genin forever comes up. He's frightened by the concept and does want to leave. However, he sees the look in Sakura and Sasuke's eyes and decides he can't let his team down. He takes the question, and being that he actually decided to take it, passes. Sakura would then scold him for stealing her paper and likely bonk him on the head. Then comes the Forest of Death. Most of this actually transpires the same way except for one thing. There's the same way except for one thing. Instead of using the 5-element sealing jutsu like Orochimaru would have on Naruto, he merely uses a chi blocking technique, which leaves Aang awake but unable to move. Orochimaru would still bite Sasuke, leaving him unconscious. Eventually, Aang's movement and bending would come back, but by this time Orochimaru is long gone, and Sasuke is in such bad shape that he can't move or even open his eyes. Aang considers having them drop out of the test, but Sakura says Sasuke wouldn't want that and that they'll just let him rest. From this point on, everything remains the same except for when the hidden sound shinobi show up. Instead of Rock Lee protecting them, Aang can do it, and he actually does about as well as Lee would have. Eventually, Sasuke would wake up, and most everything from this point remains the same. They get the second scroll due to Sasuke's cursed mark, as well as his brutal tactics, which leave Aang a bit terrified. For real, he watches him rip a kid's shoulder out of socket. Aang is starting to believe that it wasn't such a good idea to become a ninja. Then comes the exhibition matches. These go most of the same way except for Aang's matches. Aang would go up against Kiba and Akamaru. They would use their fang over fang technique on him, but they would have a bit of a harder time going up against Aang, who can use large-scale techniques on par with Neji's 8 trigrams palm rotation, but with very little drain. Aang is also a bit faster with his air scooter, and his taijutsu skills are almost on par with Rock Lee. He wouldn't be as strong and not necessarily quite as fast as Lee, but he would be close enough and agile enough that he's capable of getting past most attacks. Aang isn't really one to hurt or fight anyone for pure sport and would want to do things calmly. He would not keep it down and tell him that he's beaten and offer to help him up only to have his legs swept out from under him. Kiba would call that an insult to his pride and would attempt to capitalize on Aang's precarious position, but Aang would be ready and would shoot a massive jet of air from his feet, knocking both Kiba and Akamaru into the wall, knocking them out. After these matches, the Genin would go off for a month to train. Aang would be unsure of what to do, and so he would meditate to find the answer. However, he's approached by the spirit of Kuruk, who would take him under his wing and teach him the basics of water bending for the entirety of that month. Aang would actually start to pick it up quickly. Given that it's warm and the humidity is rather high, and especially since the next matches will be held outside, this is the perfect time to try waterbending. He's taught how to take the humidity out of the air, as well as his own sweat and the sweat of others. When the next match comes up against Neji, Aang is ready. He would strike out at Neji with his airbending, but Neji would defend himself. Neji knows that if he can just get close enough to strike Aang's Tenketsu, he can pacify that troublesome bending technique. However, getting close enough will be an issue as Aang can strike from afar and Neji needs to get close. Neji believes the best thing he can do is rush Aang and use the palm rotation to defend himself from attacks that he can't avoid, so he proceeds with this plan. Aang would attempt to blow him back with his wind using his glider to make each blast larger, but Neji's ready. He jumps over the horizontal blasts and sidesteps the vertical ones. Aang is having a hard time pinning him down, but the closer Neji gets, the easier it becomes to strike him, the less time that Neji has to dodge. Aang steps up his attacks, but Neji uses 8 trigram's palm rotation to block them. Neji would then strike out at Aang's Tenketsu, but find that he can't move. The plants below his feet have grabbed onto his feet. Aang explains that he managed to get a very good grasp on water bending and that plants are made up of water. Neji tells him that humans are as well. Aang thinks about this, but he knows he's nowhere near the level required to do that. Neji managed to break free by ditching his shoes. He keeps the pavement where there is no grass. This is taxing though, because the sun has baked the pavement, which is slowly burning his feet. But Neji takes this as a reason to finish it quickly and keeps moving along even faster than before. He would strike out at Aang and incapacitate his arms, but he would also be careful and incapacitate his feet, so he couldn't be done the same way as Kiba had been. With Aang's limbs completely paralyzed, he thinks this is in the bag. However, he didn't take into account how Aang can utilize airbending and would be subject to a sneak attack. Aang would take in a deep breath and expel air from his lungs with such force that both he and Neji are pushed away. Aang hits the wall and Neji does as well. This ends up in a double knockout. Despite everything, Aang is congratulated for having at least forced a draw on the prodigy Neji. Aang's limbs would eventually loosen up again, and he would watch Sasuke's battle alongside Sakura. However, halfway through this, the Konoha Crush begins. Everything goes about the same from here on, except instead of using Gamabunta, Aang would use Avatar State to beat Shukaku and Gaara. He would still spare him though, and Aang would offer a hand to Gaara, telling him that he could do such good if he would just let love into his heart. He would offer a soft smile and help Gaara up. Gaara would flee with his brethren, and Aang would travel back to Konoha with the rest. Then comes the search for Tsunade. However, Aang isn't Naruto and thus doesn't have the Nine Tails, meaning Itachi doesn't have a reason to come back. But this also means that Naruto isn't there to save Tsunade, meaning she would die, and Danzo would replace her, being the only one worthy of the position with Hiruzen dead. This would not change Sasuke's desire to grow stronger, and he would challenge Aang to a fight. However, it goes differently than it would with Naruto. Aang maintains a kind outlook and remains calm the entire time, letting his movements protect him without harming Sasuke. However, this isn't as easy as it was with Rock Lee, as Sasuke has a Sharingan which increases reaction time, meaning Aang has a harder time dodging. However, when Sasuke attempts to use Chidori, Aang senses the killing intent behind it and knows he needs to end the battle now before someone gets hurt.
My adult family is exhausted a lot of chakra, and I must have to give it to me myself. I still have that parasite Utsuki inside me. I have to do it.
Namaste, and congratulations on surviving your orientation. So long.
Sasuke attempts to use Chidori, Aang senses the killing intent behind it and knows he needs to end the battle now before someone gets hurt. He uses his waterbending to pull the water out of the towers atop the hospital and wash it all over Sasuke and then freeze it, leaving only his head exposed. Sasuke screams and curses Aang for his strength. This is when Kakashi shows up and scolds them for fighting like this, especially Sasuke for using a killing technique against a friend. He advises Sasuke to look back over his priorities and decide what kind of man he wants to be. Well, the Sound Force show up, kick his rear, and make that decision for him. This leads to Sasuke leaving the village during the night. Thus begins the Sasuke recovery mission. Most of this stays the same until the Valley of the End, where Sasuke awakens his second stage of his cursed seal. And despite this being Aang's element, Sasuke has access to fire-style jutsu, and thus can melt the ice or evaporate it with the strength he's granted. Even when Aang makes a large water octopus, Sasuke pierces through it with his Chidori and strikes Aang in the shoulder. This causes Aang to pass out as blood fills the water. Sasuke looks down at Aang, relishes his newfound strength, but can't bring himself to murder the boy. So he turns and leaves. As Aang is passed out, he hears the voices of Avatar's past and feels he's close to death. However, his time has not come yet, and he awakens to find the wound on his shoulder has been frozen closed by waterbending. He's then taken to the hospital for recovery. Aang promises a saddened Sakura that he will bring Sasuke back, and as such goes off on a journey to help himself grow stronger. At some point he would have a run-in with Jiraiya. Jiraiya helps him better his martial arts movements and further explains that Aang seems to be using an almost sage-like ability, and that he uses natural energies alongside his own when he uses this bending thing. He tells Aang that he should focus on that, and from that point on, Aang trains for the next 2 years. Well, I think that's long enough for a video. I don't want to keep you here all day, and so I think right here is a good place to end the story for now. But don't worry, a second part is coming your way very soon. But you will need to wait just a little bit longer. Let us know if you enjoyed this little experiment, and if you would like to see more like it in the future. We could always follow Naruto in the Avatar world, and we could branch out even further. Maybe drop baby Goku into the Attack on Titan world. Would you like to see that? Be sure to drop your own ideas of things you'd like to see in the comments. And if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing for more content like this. Let me out, hot man, and peace.
$2025 was just the beginning. Millennium's already caused enough trouble. That's not gonna happen again.
They want to keep behind the curtain and show me we got.
Go farm. What happened? She used to must tell corrupting six such people to farm. So what the heck is that? It means the ability that she uses is a rebirth.
Previously, we discussed a what-if regarding Aang becoming a Konoha Shinobi. In this, we assumed that the storm that blew Aang into the ocean transported him into the Naruto world, and there, while trying to put his life back together, managed to become a Leaf Shinobi, with his own nindo being that he will be a good ninja without the need to kill anyone. In the Land of Waves, after witnessing the near death of Sasuke, Aang awakened his avatar state for the first time. During the Chunin exams, Aang discovers water bending after a run-in with one of his predecessors, Avatar Guru, and forces a draw with Neji after having his arms paralyzed by the Gentle Fist technique. He would also manage to defend himself from Sasuke on the hospital's roof by breaking the water towers and covering Sasuke in ice. However, when Sasuke left, Aang would find that he isn't strong enough to control Sasuke's curse mark in his second stage.